The 4th of June, 1943. Mexia, Texas, a sea of electric lights blazed across the plains, shattering 3 years of Nazi propaganda. Unteroffizier Fritz Burkhardt, trembling, wrote in his secret diary, "No nation could possess such abundance while fighting a war." In Germany, blackouts cloaked the Reich, yet here, farmhouses glowed like stars, mocking tales of a weak America. Headman Friedrich Radke, an Iron Cross veteran, stepped off a cushioned Pullman train, whispering, "We're tourists, not prisoners." The sight of neon-lit diners and workers' cars stunned Obergefreiter Hans Müller. Every town glows they've had electricity since the 1922. In Tunisia's dust, Radke saw American jeeps roll endlessly, sowing doubt. This is no collapsing nation. Across the Atlantic, Kurt Zimmermann watched sailors toss stakes overboard, noting, "Their abundance is normal." At Norfolk's vast docks, Wilhelm von Steuben saw radar on cargo ships and wrote, "Germany's defeat began in my mind that day." By 1945, Hans Müller taught democracy in Texas, confessing, "We were fed lies." These prisoners, once warriors of the Reich, would leave as architects of a new Germany, transformed not by force, but by the overwhelming truth of America's prosperity. Part 1. Arrival in America, the first shock of abundance. The 4th of June, 1943, Mexia, Texas. Unteroffizier Fritz Burkhardt's pencil shook as he wrote in his secret diary, words that could land him in solitary if discovered. The Americans must be lying. No nation could have such wealth in war. Through the train window, he saw a sight that shattered Nazi propaganda. Electric lights blazing across the Texas plains. Farmhouses glowed, shop windows sparkled, and streetlights lit up the night at 10 p.m. In Germany, blackouts had darkened the Reich since 1940, with only 20% of farms electrified. Yet here, in a nation deemed decadent by Berlin, electricity flowed freely, a constellation of prosperity. The train, a cushioned Pullman coach with dining cars, carried 1,850 Afrika Korps veterans, not in cattle cars, but in comfort unthinkable in German transports. Mexia's townsfolk gathered, curious, not hostile, their faces lit by streetlights. Women in bright dresses and children with wide eyes watched as Fritz, a baker's son from Saxony, stepped onto the platform. In his village, oil lamps lit their nights. Here, every home glowed. "If this is their countryside," he wrote, "what are their cities?" Obergefreiter Hans Müller, clutching a photo of his mother, expected cruelty. Instead, a Texan guard, Jimmy, offered water and apologized for a delay, as if they were guests. Hans whispered to Fritz, "We're tourists, not prisoners." The observation car revealed endless fields, neon signs, flashing diner ads, luxuries Fritz's sister could only dream of. Her stockings rationed back home. A woman handed apples to the prisoners. Fritz bit into one, its sweetness a stark contrast to North Africa's stale bread. The crowd didn't jeer. A farmer boasted of a bumper crop, enough to feed armies. Fritz's mind reeled. Germany's farms struggled, yet America thrived on two fronts. The lights of Mexia weren't just illumination, they were sparks of doubt. These men, shaped by war and propaganda, faced a nation radiating confidence. As the train rolled toward the camps, Fritz sensed a psychological unraveling beginning. The America they'd been told was weak was anything but, and the journey ahead would challenge everything they believed. Part 2. Defeat in Tunisia, the beginning of doubt. The 13th of May, 1943, Tunisia. The desert sun scorched the earth as General Jürgen von Arnim surrendered, ending the Afrika Korps campaign. Headman Friedrich Radke, Iron Cross holder and veteran of France and North Africa, stood among 250,000 to 275,000 defeated German and Italian soldiers. The numbers fluctuated as scattered units capitulated over days. These men, who had pushed the British to Egypt and earned Montgomery's respect, were now prisoners. Radke, wounded twice, felt the weight of defeat. His diary, later found in the National Archives, captured the psychological cracks forming in Nazi ideology. "We were the Reich's finest," he wrote, "yet we kneel in the sand." The surrender was chaos. Shouts in German, Italian, and English mingled with the clatter of discarded rifles. Radke, a carpenter's son from Leipzig, recalled his father's pride when he joined the Wehrmacht. Now, that pride felt hollow. In Oran, Algeria, American efficiency stunned him. The U.S. Army processed thousands daily, issuing identity cards, photographing prisoners, and administering inoculations with precision surpassing the Wehrmacht's peak. Officers explained Geneva Convention rights in fluent German, a detail that unnerved Radke. "They treat us like soldiers, not criminals," he noted, expecting brutality from the decadent Americans. The first real shock was the food. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, captured with the 21st Panzer Division, wrote to his mother months later, "In Oran's cages, they fed us better than 6 months in the desert. White bread, real coffee, meat twice daily." Radke, used to moldy rations, bit into soft bread and wondered if it was propaganda. It wasn't. This was standard American fare. A fellow prisoner, Karl, a farmer from Bavaria, whispered, "If they feed prisoners like this, what do their soldiers eat?" The question lingered, sowing doubt. Nazi tales of a weak America crumbled as Radke saw jeeps roll in endless supply, driven by soldiers who seemed carefree, not battle-worn. The makeshift camps buzzed with rumors. Some POWs clung to Hitler's promises of victory. Others, like Radke, felt the Reich's invincibility fading. A young American medic, patching Radke's wounds, spoke of factories back home churning out tanks daily. Radke scoffed, but the medic's casual confidence unnerved him. As they awaited transport ships, the prisoners glimpsed American organizational might tents erected overnight, supplies stacked in neat rows. Radke wrote, "This is no collapsing nation. We were lied to." The seeds of doubt, planted in Tunisia's dust, would grow as they faced the full scope of American power across the Atlantic. Part 3. The Atlantic Crossing, Floating Classrooms of Power. July 1943. The Atlantic Ocean churned like a living beast as Liberty ships carried 30,000 POWs monthly across the waves. Feld Kurt Zimmermann of the 90th Light Division, a quiet mechanic from Munich, stared at the horizon from the deck of the SS Robert E. Peary. This vessel, a marvel built in just 4 days, 15 hours and 29 minutes at Kaiser's Richmond shipyards, symbolized American might. Zimmermann's diary, preserved in family letters after repatriation, captured the voyage's second phase of psychological demolition. "We sailed on ships produced 3 per day," he wrote, "while our U-boats sank 1 every few months." The 2-week crossing was no grim march, but a floating revelation. Zimmermann, seasick and haunted by Tunisia's defeat, watched American sailors discard food waste daily: half-eaten steaks, whole loaves of bread, gallons of milk, more than his company received weekly in Africa. "They threw it overboard without a thought," he noted. "Not to mock us, but because abundance was their norm." A burly sailor, Jack from Brooklyn, overheard and chuckled, "Kid, back home, we waste more than you eat in a year. Our farms can't keep up." Zimmermann, raised in rationed Berlin, where bread was a luxury, felt a knot of envy and shame. Nazi propaganda had painted America as starving. Reality was a feast tossed to the sea. Dialogues with the crew deepened the cracks. Zimmermann asked about the ship's engines, 900 horsepower cylinders from 3 factories across 32 states. The engineer, a grizzled veteran, explained casually, "Built-in ports that didn't exist 2 years ago." We're at 2,710 of these babies by war's end. Zimmerman shared tales of German shipyards, crippled by shortages, where one destroyer took months. "You're a factory on water," he muttered, earning a nod. "That's the idea, Fritz. We don't fight wars with wishes, we build them." As the ship neared America, Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Stobern, from a Prussian family of warriors since Frederick the Great, gazed at the rotating radar antenna. "We thought this tech was ours alone," he later wrote in his memoirs, "yet it's standard on cargo ships. Then I knew Germany had lost." The prisoners huddled below decks, fears of submarines giving way to whispers of doubt. Karl, the Bavarian farmer from Oren, confessed, "If they build like this, what awaits us?" The voyage, meant for transport, became a classroom. Endless parts from 1,500 subcontractors, supply lines unbroken by war. Zimmerman reflected on his pre-war life, tinkering in a dim workshop. Here, innovation was limitless. The Atlantic swells carried not just men, but the erosion of ideology. These POWs, once conquerors, now glimpsed the industrial colossus that would redefine their world. As land appeared, Zimmerman wrote, "The sea taught us America's power is not in soldiers, but in steel and sweat." Part 4, Norfolk Naval Base, Industrial Colossus Revealed. The 2nd of August, 1943, Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. As the Liberty ship docked, 1,850 Afrika Korps POWs gazed at a sprawling testament to American power. The base covered 4,300 acres, its docks stretching miles, cranes moving ceaselessly, handling more tonnage in a day than Hamburg's port managed in a week. Gerfreiter Johann Weber, a Ruhr factory worker before conscription, scribbled in his secret diary, 47 cargo ships, loaded and unloaded by electric cranes. In Germany, this would take a dozen men and horses. The sight crushed Nazi tales of American weakness. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Stobern, descendant of Prussian nobility, stood rigid, his eyes fixed on a radar antenna spinning atop a freighter. "We believed only we had such technology," he later wrote in his memoirs. "Yet, it's standard here." Germany's defeat began in my mind that day. The prisoners marched in columns, passing parking lots filled with hundreds of civilian cars, dock workers' own vehicles. In Germany, cars were for the elite. The Volkswagen, a Nazi promise since 1934, had delivered fewer than 1,000 to civilians. Here, laborers drove to work, their Fords gleaming under the Sunday. Weber, who once toiled in coal-choke factories, marveled at the clean efficiency. "No smoke, just electricity," he noted, contrasting it with Essen's smog. A black dock worker operated a crane with precision, a sight that stunned him. Nazi ideology scorned such roles for minorities. A woman in overalls welded nearby, her torch sparking. Weber whispered to a comrade, "They let women and Negroes do this, and it works?" The guard, overhearing, grinned. "Ladies better than most guys, built half this port." The casual pride and diversity shook Weber's worldview. The march to the trains revealed more. Children waved from bicycles, their clothes bright, their faces well-fed. In Weber's hometown, kids scavenged for scraps. Here, they played freely. A vendor tossed the prisoners oranges, a luxury unseen in Germany since 1939. Weber caught one, its weight heavy in his hand, and wondered if this was staged. But the guards' ease, their chatter about baseball and weekend plans, suggested otherwise. This was America's reality, not propaganda. As they boarded Pullman coaches, Stobern overheard two workers discuss output. "We ship enough steel to build a panzer division daily." The scale was incomprehensible. Weber, clutching his diary, wrote, "This port alone could supply an army. What have we challenged?" The prisoners, once proud warriors, felt their certainty erode. Norfolk's cranes, cars, and confidence weren't just infrastructure, they were proof of a nation's unyielding strength, sowing doubts that would deepen with every mile into America's heart. Part 5. The Train Journey, a Moving Revelation. August 1943, the Pullman coaches rolled through Virginia's Green Hills, carrying Afrika Korps POWs toward Texas and Oklahoma. Headman Friedrich Radke, his face pressed against the panoramic window, watched America unfold, towns ablaze with electric lights, a stark contrast to Germany's blacked-out nights. "We boarded like tourists, not prisoners," he wrote in his diary, later found in the National Archives. These were no cramped boxcars, but luxurious trains with padded seats, dining cars with silver cutlery, and observation decks. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, from Hamburg, stared at illuminated shop windows in Martinsville and Greensboro, displaying goods unseen in Germany since 1939. "Every town glows," he wrote. "They've had electricity since the 1922nd. I called the guard a liar. He just shrugged." The three-day journey shattered Nazi myths. Factories ran night shifts, their windows glowing, parking lots full at midnight. Radke, a carpenter's son, recalled his Leipzig home, where one street lamp lit his street. Here, even rural depots sparkled. A guard, Sergeant Tom from Ohio, apologized for a faulty air conditioner, a luxury Radke thought reserved for Hitler's train. "Air conditioning?" he whispered to Muller. "In war?" Tom overheard, chuckling. "Buddy, my grandma's got one." The casual wealth stunned them workers in leather boots, drinking Coca-Cola, tossing half-smoked cigarettes. The three-day journey shattered Nazi myths. Factories ran night shifts, their windows glowing, parking lots full at midnight. Radke, a carpenter's son, recalled his Leipzig home, where one street lamp lit his street. Here, even rural depots sparkled. A guard, Sergeant Tom from Ohio, apologized for a faulty air conditioner, a luxury Radke thought reserved for Hitler's train. "Air conditioning?" he whispered to Muller. "In war?" Tom overheard, chuckling. "Buddy, my grandma's got one." The casual wealth stunned them workers in leather boots, drinking Coca-Cola, tossing half-smoked cigarettes. The countryside revealed more. Fields stretching endless, dotted with tractors. In Germany, horses plowed farms. Here, machines did. A young POW, Karl, whispered, "How do they fight two wars and live like this?" Radke had no answer. Passing a neon-lit diner, he saw families eating children with ice cream, women in bright dresses. His mother's letters spoke of soup kitchens. This abundance felt like betrayal. "If this is normal," he wrote, "what is our Reich?" The train's rhythm, once comforting, now pulsed with doubt. Each mile exposed a nation not just surviving, but thriving, its confidence a silent rebuke to Nazi lies. For Radke and Muller, the journey wasn't just to camps, it was into a reality that unraveled their world. Part 6. Camp Life, Comfort Beyond Comprehension. August 1943, Camp Hearn, Texas. Built in just 4 months, the camp housed up to 4,800 German POWs in conditions that stunned them. Wooden barracks gleamed with electric lights, flush toilets, hot showers, and steam heat luxuries surpassing most prisoners' civilian lives. Oberst Dr. Friedrich Bauer, a surgeon from the 164th Light Division, entered the camp hospital and froze. X-ray machines, surgical tools, penicillin, he later testified. Better than German civilian hospitals. Penicillin, a rumored miracle drug, was used freely, even on minor infections, while German soldiers died for want of basic medicines. Feldwebel Otto Krebs, a former Munich chef, worked in the camp kitchen, a marvel of walk-in refrigerators, electric mixers, and gas ranges feeding 5,000 men. "We threw away more food than my family saw in 3 years, he wrote, tears staining his notebook as he discarded perfect bread. Daily rations included fresh milk, eggs, meat, and vegetables, quantities unseen in Germany since 1939. Krebs, who once stretched watery soup for his siblings, felt guilt and awe. "They prepared 10% extra to ensure full plates," he noted. The surplus is garbage. The camp pulsed with American excess. POWs, like Hans from Hamburg, recalled pre-war nights huddling in cold flats, sharing one blanket. Here, barracks were warm, beds soft. A guard, noticing Hans' tattered boots, handed him new ones, saying, "Can't have you limping." The gesture, small but human, gnawed at Hans' Nazi-taught disdain. At a camp talent show, POWs sang folk songs, joined by a local guitarist strumming American tunes. The shared music, under Texas stars, felt like a truce, not captivity. Bauer, treating a POW's wound, learned from an American nurse about penicillin's origins, a story of global science, not Aryan superiority. They share knowledge with enemies, he wrote, shaken. Krebs, kneading dough, overheard guards discuss baseball, their voices light, unworried by war. In Munich, fear of air raids loomed. Here, life thrived. A young POW, Carl, whispered, "If this is prison, what is their freedom like?" The question haunted them. Camp movie night showed Hollywood films, not propaganda stories of love, struggle, hope. Hans watched, marveling at America's openness, its flaws displayed without shame. Bauer, treating a POW's wound, learned from an American nurse about penicillin's origins, a story of global science, not Aryan superiority. They share knowledge with enemies, he wrote, shaken. Krebs, kneading dough, overheard guards discuss baseball, their voices light, unworried by war. In Munich, fear of air raids loomed. Here, life thrived. A young POW, Carl, whispered, "If this is prison, what is their freedom like?" The question haunted them. Camp movie night showed Hollywood films, not propaganda stories of love, struggle, hope. Hans watched, marveling at America's openness, its flaws displayed without shame. Part 7. Labor in the Heartland, Witnessing Agricultural Might. September 1943. The American heartland unfolded before German POWs as they worked fields and factories, their labor revealing a nation of staggering abundance. Unteroffizier Herbert Lang, at a Houston cotton gin, watched a machine process more cotton in an hour than his Prussian village could in a month. The farmer wasn't aristocracy, just a man, Lang wrote, yet he had electricity, a truck, a car, powered by the Colorado River Authority, electrifying 90% of Texas farms by 1943, the gin hummed with efficiency. Lang, raised on hand-picked fields, felt his world shrink. In Nebraska, Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffman worked sugar beet fields, awestruck by combines harvesting 100 acres daily, yielding 60 bushels per acre, double Germany's best. The farmer's son, 16, drove a tractor worth my father's lifetime earnings, Hoffman noted. The boy laughed, calling it not even a good one, awaiting a new John Deere. Hoffman, from a farm reliant on oxen, stared at fields stretching to the horizon, each larger than his county. A local farmer, chewing tobacco, offered him a Coke, saying, "Y'all work hard, but our machines work harder." In Nebraska, Gefreiter Wilhelm Hoffman worked sugar beet fields, awestruck by combines harvesting 100 acres daily, yielding 60 bushels per acre, double Germany's best. The farmer's son, 16, drove a tractor worth my father's lifetime earnings, Hoffman noted. The boy laughed, calling it not even a good one, awaiting a new John Deere. Hoffman, from a farm reliant on oxen, stared at fields stretching to the horizon, each larger than his county. A local farmer, chewing tobacco, offered him a Coke, saying, "Y'all work hard, but our machines work harder." Hoffman overheard farmers discuss yields that seemed fantastical enough to feed Europe. In Germany, hunger was a constant. Here, surplus was normal. "A POW," Carl whispered. "Their machines do what 100 of us could not." Hoffman nodded, recalling his father's plow breaking under wartime strain. The prisoner's work, meant to fill labor shortages, became a lesson in American scale. Lang wrote, "Every farm is a factory, every farmer a king." A radio blared swing music as they worked, a sound of freedom that jarred their disciplined minds. These fields weren't just land, they were proof of a system that thrived where Nazism failed. Lang and Hoffman, shaped by scarcity, saw abundance that defied their reality. Each tractor, each full lunchbox, eroded their belief in German superiority. If this is their strength, Hoffman wrote, what hope has the Reich? The Heartland's bounty, worked by diverse hands, wasn't just agriculture, it was a revelation, sowing seeds of doubt that would reshape their futures. Part 8. Industrial Marvels, Factories of the Future. Autumn 1943, American factories unveiled a world beyond German comprehension. At a Campbell soup plant in New Jersey, Stabsfeld Webel Ernst Wagner watched production lines process more tomatoes in a day than his pre-war German factory handled in a month. Everything was automated, he wrote, conveyor belts, steam cookers, filling machines. Run by women and elderly men, the plant outpaced peacetime levels despite wartime labor shortages. Wagner, a former food processor, marveled as a woman, monitored controls managing what took 50 workers in Germany, all while sipping coffee and humming to a radio. Near Detroit, Obergefreiter Franz Kellner unloaded coal at a power plant, glimpsing the River Rouge complex across the water. Employing 100,000 workers, it produced jeeps, aircraft engines, and tanks, consuming 1.5 million kilowatts daily, more than Hamburg. Workers' cars filled thousands of parking spaces, Kellner wrote. In Germany, officers rarely owned cars. Here, laborers drove too. A guard boasted, "My cousin's got a Ford for work, another for Sundays." Kellner taught America was chaotic, saw relentless precision. The scale defied Nazi propaganda. Republic Steel in Ohio churned out 10,000 tons daily, fed by endless ore and coal trains. Wagner, who worked at Krupp, wrote, "They waste more steel than we produce." Women welded with skill, teenagers ran drills, and black workers operated cranes, scenes unthinkable in the Reich. A female welder, noticing Wagner's stare, grinned. "First time seeing a gal do this?" He nodded, ashamed of his indoctrination. "Keep up, soldier," she teased, sparking a reluctant smile. Conversations with workers deepened the impact. A black machinist shared a cigarette, saying, "War or no war, we build." Kellner, raised on racial myths, felt his beliefs crack. In Germany, factories choked on coal dust. Here, electric power hummed cleanly. Wagner overheard talk of overtime complaints, yet production dwarfed Germany's slave labor output. "They grumble about hours," he noted, "while making what we couldn't dream." The factories were classrooms of doubt. Kellner saw a woman adjust a machine with ease, her radio playing jazz, a sound banned in Berlin. "This is freedom," he thought, recalling Gestapo raids on dance halls. Wagner, watching cans roll off lines, calculated Germany's lag. "One plant outproduces our Ruhr," he wrote. The prisoners' labor, meant to support America's war, became a lesson in futility. Nazi promises of industrial supremacy dissolved against this relentless machine. "If this is their power," Kellner scribbled, "our war is a fantasy." The factories, alive with diverse hands, weren't just making goods, they were dismantling an ideology, one automated line at a time. Part 9. Ideological collapse, embracing new ideas. Winter 1943, American prison camps became crucibles of transformation. The ideological collapse syndrome, noted by Major Paul Neeland of the Provost Marshal General's office, swept through German POWs. Over 40,000 enrolled in educational programs, reading American newspapers, and debating democracy. Lieutenant Hermann Goetz, captured with the 10th Panzer Division, wrote in a letter that passed censors, "We were told America was weak, divided, ruled by Jews. Here, I see unity, strength, organization." Camp newspapers, like Der Ruf at Fort Kearny, shifted from nationalism to discussions of free markets and civil rights, edited by carefully chosen anti-Nazi prisoners. The change wasn't forced, but observed. POWs like Hans from Hamburg, once fanatical, grew quiet. "They don't argue statistics anymore," Neeland reported. "They've seen too much." Hans, who sneered at democracy, now pored over the New York Times, stunned by its open criticism of leaders unthinkable in Berlin. At a camp lecture, a Jewish-American professor spoke of constitutional checks, sparking whispers among POWs. In Germany, this man would be dead, Hans murmured to Karl, a fellow prisoner. Here, he teaches us. Camp theaters showed the grapes of wrath, exposing America's flaws without shame. Guts wrote, "They show their struggles to enemies. This honesty strengthens them." POWs debated in mess halls, their voices low but urgent. Karl, a farmer's son, shared childhood memories of Nazi rallies, now questioning their fervor. "We were fed lies," he admitted, voice cracking. A guard, overhearing, offered a book on American history, saying, "Read it, decide for yourself." The gesture, simple yet profound, shook Karl's loyalty. The Christmas of 1943 deepened the shift. Local churches sent 500,000 gift packages, cigarettes, candy, games to POWs, enemies who had fought their sons. At Camp Hern, a Methodist choir sang German carols, their voices drifting over barbed wire. Hans clutched a handmade card from a Boy Scout, tears welling. "They know we're enemies, yet show kindness," he wrote. This wasn't propaganda, it was humanity, clashing with Nazi racial myths. Guts, watching Italians in service units work freely post-surrender, noted, "They treat traitors better than we treated allies. This is democracy's strength." The re-education program, subtle yet effective, thrived on exposure. POWs, taught to see America as barbaric, found libraries, universities, and open discourse. Hans attended a lecture on economics, marveling at America's wealth from freedom, not conquest. "We were warriors for a lie," he whispered. The camps, meant for containment, became schools of doubt, turning fanatics into questioners. As Guts wrote, "I see a nation that works. We were wrong." The seeds of democracy, sown in captivity, began to sprout, reshaping minds for a future beyond the Reich. The re-education program, subtle yet effective, thrived on exposure. POWs, taught to see America as barbaric, found libraries, universities, and open discourse. Hans attended a lecture on economics, marveling at America's wealth from freedom, not conquest. "We were warriors for a lie," he whispered. The camps, meant for containment, became schools of doubt, turning fanatics into questioners. As Guts wrote, "I see a nation that works. We were wrong." The seeds of democracy, sown in captivity, began to sprout, reshaping minds for a future beyond the Reich. By May 1945, 371,683 German POWs faced repatriation from American camps, their minds transformed by abundance and humanity. Hans Kroll, once at Camp Shelby, became West Germany's ambassador to the U.S. Walter Hallstein, a camp co-teacher, led the European Commission. Rüdiger von Marr, from Camp Hern, served at the UN, and Eduard Ackermann reformed German agriculture. These men, shaped by America's prosperity, carried lessons home. "We saw freedom create wealth," Kroll wrote. "Diversity brings strength." The 1985 Austin reunion saw 500 former POWs return, families in tow, to honor their transformation. Between 1945 and 1946, prisoners returned to a shattered Germany, armed with skills from American vocational courses and hope from the Marshall Plan's promise. Oberst Friedrich von Stauben wrote, "They gave us tools to rebuild, not ruin." At Camp Hern, Hans Müller, once a Hamburg fanatic, taught democracy classes, his voice steady with conviction. "We learned from their example," he said, recalling a guard's kindness, a food package sent to his starving mother in Germany. Such acts, separating Germans from Nazism, proved democracy's power. The camp's impact was profound. Only 2,222 of 371,683 attempted escape. 95% rated treatment as good. 74% said captivity reshaped their worldview. Thousands corresponded with American families for decades, some immigrating in the 1,950 seconds. At the reunion, Obergefreiter Hans Weber, now a Maine physician, spoke. "We found dignity in captivity, running water, food, respect." His daughter, born in America, wept, hearing her father's past. Stabsfeld Wabel Kurt Meir, once in Iowa fields, added, "Farmers shared meals, not as enemies, but as men. That changed us." The final blow came with concentration camp footage in 1945. POWs like Hedman Walter Schmidt, a Bavarian, faced the Reich's horrors. "We were tools of criminals," he wrote, voice breaking as newsreels showed the truth. America's prosperity, its food, factories, and freedom had dismantled Nazi myths. Its humanity completed the transformation. Herman Gutz, at the reunion, declared, "We came as Nazis, left as Democrats." America's weapon wasn't bombs, but creation, its confidence, its kindness. The auditorium roared, Germans and Americans united. The final blow came with concentration camp footage in 1945. POWs like Hedman Walter Schmidt, a Bavarian, faced the Reich's horrors. "We were tools of criminals," he wrote, voice breaking as newsreels showed the truth. America's prosperity, its food, factories, and freedom had dismantled Nazi myths. Its humanity completed the transformation. Herman Gutz, at the reunion, declared, "We came as Nazis, left as Democrats." America's weapon wasn't bombs, but creation, its confidence, its kindness. The auditorium roared, Germans and Americans united. Please press like and subscribe to the channel, or wait for my latest video.